Clay Smith picked these two. He's the literary director. And he picked these two to be in conversation with each other. And I think that was spot on. I thought that was so brilliant. Once I read both the books, and they're terrific. So I'm very excited. I want, for people who haven't read the books, to give people a sense of them through talking about some of the, because you take us into new worlds, sort of, to help establish us in those worlds. So Helen, I'll start with you. I want you to put your mic on.
Okay.
And I want you to help set the scene for us. Let's start with the word bunnies. What are bunnies in hum?
Let's see, is this working? It sounds good, yeah? Okay, thanks everyone. Thank you all for coming. What a beautiful crowd. So wonderful to see you all. Bunnies in the world of hum are watches that every single child wears that serves as both the place where they do homework and the place where you can track them, the place that tracks their heart rate, the therapist that they can speak to if they're feeling upset about something at school. It is their all-purpose, all-encompassing bunny that they wear all the time.
And then let's tell people about wombs, and this is not a speech impediment, they're wombs, W-O-O-M-S's.
W-O-O-M-S's. Okay, so in the world of hum, wombs are these egg-shaped, all-encompassing physical pods that you can enter, and everyone has them because they're subsidized by advertisers. You have them in your home, and everyone in the family would have one, and you can enter the womb, and you can stream whatever you want. So maybe you'd want to stream a video game or nature scenes or anything, but every 8 minutes you get interrupted with a very disruptive advertisement.
Unless you pay more.
Unless you pay more. But if you're like my family in my book, they can't afford that, so they have to be interrupted in whatever experience they're having every 8 minutes by an ad. And another thing that the womb can do is you can put it on the womb setting, so it's called a WOOM, but you can put it on the WOMB setting, where you can make it, the walls become red veined, and you start to hear a heartbeat and the whoosh of blood, so it like puts you back in the womb. So this is a kind of privacy and isolation that you can experience in your own home, which obviously takes no inspiration from the way that we all in our homes fall into our phones and ignore the people around us.
And then the all-important hum of the title.
So hum of the title. Hum is the name in the book for the robots, the super intelligent embodied robots that walk around the world. And they look like sculptural in their physical body, but they have arms and legs and a head, and they have a torso that is a screen, which you can use in all sorts of ways to interact with them. And I picked the name hum because it's a derivative of human, H-U-M, but also because that word for me has two very different valences. So on the one hand, a hum can be an annoying sound of like a machine or your fridge or something humming in the background in a troubling, annoying way. But also a hum has a really positive connotation for me of someone humming a song while they're doing the dishes or a parent humming a lullaby to a child. And that duality was something I really wanted in the characters of the hum, so that's why I picked that name.
And the hums observe.
And the hums observe. They are surveilling you at all times.
Yeah. Okay, Laila, take us into Dream Hotel. Let's start with, what should we start with? One's risk score.
Yes. So in the world of the Dream Hotel, there is a universal risk assessment system that has been put in place in the United States that basically uses any number of sources to compile your likelihood of committing a crime. So, for example, if you have an arrest record, your likelihood of committing a crime goes up, right? But it also can be, you know, your whether you're renting or owning, what you do on social media, your health status, all kinds of data. And in fact, one of the officers in the book brags that it's 200 data sources, one of which is the focus of this book, is your dreams.
Yeah. And then if your risk score hits a certain number, you might end up in a retention center?
Yes.
Tell us about retention centers.
Yes, so retention centers, so in this future United States, which I suppose is not very far from
We'll get to that.
So the risk score is essentially, I modeled it after your credit score. So just as, you know, in the 1950s and 60s, we didn't have a credit score system, but now it's been so normalized, we sort of accept that there's a number that follows us around and determines our credit worthiness. So in the world of the novel, this model is applied to crime. And the retention centers in the book are specifically designed for people who are whose risk scores are high because of their dreams. So obviously, if your risk score is high because you've committed a crime, you go to jail. But if you know your dreams suggest that you might, I don't know, commit murder, then you are held under observation, not in a detention center, but in a retention center, where the purpose is basically to observe you and make sure that you don't actually commit the crime. So. And the joke in the book, one of the agents who's working in one of those retention center calls it a dream hotel. So, and it turned into a joke, and so that's the title of the book.
And Sada, who's the main character, who ends up in a retention center. I mean, you can when she first, ends up there and is do we say arrested? Is detained, and she. She's running through her mind, like, what is it? What did I do? Is it my cousin? Is it she has this interaction on an airplane, like what, she can't figure it out. I mean, she's really sort of underwater in this way.
Yeah, it's if you get, airports for me are sites of great anxiety for, I think, very obvious reasons. And so the character in the book, Sarah Hussein, is returning home from a conference abroad and is returning to LAX and gets pulled aside because her risk score is high. And of course, it's very natural when somebody says that when you're at risk of committing a crime, you're like, who, me? Like, what did I do? Is it because I, this or that? And you start running through all these possibilities. And since this world of the novel considers, as I said, 200 sources, she's, there's no shortage of things that she might have done that could have ticked the score up. And, in the end of that sort of first section of the book, she realizes it's because of her dreams, or is told it's because of her dreams.
Okay, one more word to check in on this world, and I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, Techmarian.
Oh, yes. So Techmarians are devices that the agents that work at the retention center, obviously this is a place of total surveillance, but surveillance is essentially a beast that can never be satisfied. And so it's not enough that there's cameras and that, that they have devices. All of them have these implants that basically, that's how they have access to, that's how the government has access to their dreams. And none of that is enough. The agents too are agents of surveillance, and so if they catch something that the cameras don't, this would be sort of human intelligence. If they catch something or notice something or overhear something, they would report it on their little devices, the Techmarians.
Yeah. I wanted to start with this because I think what both of these books do so well is you're lulled into the familiarity. It feels like sort of now, like maybe next week, or the week after, or maybe last week, but really, you do this world building, and so I think hearing some of that is really helpful. Something that is very grounded in now. This is something that they both shared, and I'll start with you, Helen. Is the hums. They are very human in many ways. Then you'll be in sort of a conversation, it seemed like, with the hums, May, the main character, to say, and then all of a sudden the hum sort of slides into this sales moment, and then they're trying to push stuff out at you. And then the hum just in the audio, I highly recommend the audiobook for this because the hum voice is terrific. And they say, "Do you approve this transaction? May, do you approve this transaction? Tell me about that." And then,
well, the advertising, it manifests, it might feel a little futuristic because it's coming by way of the hum and this torso screen, but I actually feel like that is the very most realistic part of the book.
Totally.
And just the way that we are so targeted by advertising all the time. One of the original seeds for the book was I was walking home from work and it crossed my mind, I need to buy new dish rags. And just like a private personal thought, and I came home and opened my computer, and I was immediately advertised dish rags, and I was like, wait, I think this is a very common experience. Like, how did they penetrate my desire? That's not a very deep desire, and I'm sure I bought the dish rags that they recommended. I just did it, but it left me with this uneasy, queasy feeling, and so I thought, what would be a really extreme manifestation of this penetration of your inner desires? Again, the desire for dishcloths is not deep, but what would the manifestation be if it was a deeper penetration? So advertising was really important to me, thinking about that. I find it a source of humor in the book. It's kind of a dark humor, but it'll be like they're having like a deep, intimate, potentially powerful conversation, and then the hum is like, you would look much better in slouchy boots or something. And so you realize, oh, I thought we were operating on one level or connecting on one level, but actually you're just trying to sell me something. So that was a very foundational part even of my earliest ideas for the book.
Well, and it opens with sort of basically a surgery, and the hum is performing a surgery, and like there's this sort of, taking care of you quality of a surgeon. And then all of a sudden it is pushing face cream.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And she feels the opening scene is she's getting her face modified so that she can't be recognized by surveillance because she's lost her job to artificial intelligence. And this is a way to make money for her family by being a guinea pig in this experiment. So you have the needle inching towards her eye. And she feels that she and the hum have this very intimate experience as the hum is, approaching her eye with the needle, but then it gets into the advertising. So that sensitive touch seems a little coarser after that.
Yeah. Well, yours also, the Dream Hotel also, there's a lot of agreeing to the terms of service. And you have agreed to the terms of service. That also happens in hum in a slightly different way. So are we complicit in this world? How complicit are we in this future world? How complicit was Sada in the Dream Hotel, in landing herself there?
Yeah, I think that's one of the ideas that the book explores, is like the extent to which we are complicit in our own, subjugation. We all have that experience of needing to use an app, and you get the terms of service, do you agree? And you're like, yes, just get me to the thing, and so we agree. And who here sits through and reads all of the terms of service of any of the products that we use? So, so you could say that, yes, on some level we are responsible for not reading the fine print. But one of the ideas that the book explores is that really true? Like, are we really exercising free will when we are, are we really making informed decisions when we are saying yes to these terms of conditions? Like, can we say that we really are responsible, or is it really that the system is designed to make us think that we have consented to this? Many people don't realize that some of the data collection is how that data is going to be used in the future, right? So it's buried deep into the terms of service. It's written in incomprehensible legalese. Even if you did sit there and read through all of that, you wouldn't necessarily understand the legal implications of it because you're not trained as a lawyer. So are we really consenting, even when we say yes? So that's one of the, the book really explores all these big ideas about, how much free will do we have left in this system of total surveillance, total technological surveillance?
And May has a very similar experience to terms of service. This is something that you also why was this something you also wanted to tap into?
Yeah, so with the money she makes from being the guinea pig in this experiment, she spends the money and part of the money in kind of a foolish way. She buys passes so that she and her family can spend 3 nights in this place called the Botanical Garden, which is the one remaining green forested space in their city.
It's very unaffordable.
It's very expensive, and it's a total stupid waste of the money because she needs to pay rent, but she just wants to do one nice thing because it's been a hard, difficult time for her family. So she's approaching the Botanical Garden with her family, and as she's at the entrance, and the kids are so excited, and this is just so exciting and amazing for everyone, she's presented with a terms of service. And she's like, well, do I have to sign? And they're like, well, you don't have to sign, but then you can't enter. And so the kids are pulling on her, and she's just like, okay, fine. And then later in the book, it comes out that she was agreeing to things that she didn't realize she was agreeing to, so.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I found really interesting about that, and I think is a common theme between the books, is that this sort of like yearning, even when you have this sort of obviously dystopian system that the characters are living under, this sort of like deep desire for like a sense of freedom and a sense of beauty in their lives. And your character, May, is prepared to sacrifice a lot just so that her kids can see what a real strawberry, and not the strawberries that the family provides, but like the real strawberries taste like. And in the Dream Hotel, my character, Sarah, engages in what she calls like thinking through what she calls her shadow life. Like what would have happened if she hadn't foolishly gotten this implant that helps her sleep and that eventually leads to her dreams being surveilled, that lands her into this world. And so she's constantly engaging with that shadow life and imagining what freedom would look like. And so that's one of the reasons that I said that writing this world actually made me more hopeful, not less hopeful. So.
I think what you both just touched on is that the center of these books are 2 moms trying to do better, the tension of trying to make things a little smoother, make things a little better, make things work, because she has infants, she has twin infants when she gets it, and she's trying to, her husband's sleeping, she thinks she should sleep and try to keep up with his sleep, and and May's literally, I think the phrase in the book is sells her face, and talk to me about the mother, the maternal instinct to smooth and make better and make mistakes. I mean, there's just it's just so like tummy wrenching, both the books, and really relatable.
I mean, I think in my case, when I started thinking about this book, I initially thought that it might be cool to write it from the perspective of like an engineer within this tech company that creates this device that enables the company to help you sleep. So the way that it works is you get this tiny little implant, and if you're down for 4 hours, you actually get the benefits of 8 hours of sleep. And one of the things that happened when I had friends read the manuscripts, I was amazed how many of them said, I would get that implant, right? Like this. And I have to tell you, I probably would have to think about it very carefully because I'm an insomniac. But so she gets it, primarily my character gets this implant because she's trying to be a mom and still work. She works as a museum archivist, and they're twins and they're toddlers and they're going everywhere. And her husband is like this perfect dad because he has the implant so he can get enough sleep. And so, there's this sort of like desire to be a better mother. And I think part of the reason why I sort of changed from wanting to have this engineer to having just a museum archivist and a mom is because I think motherhood is one of the sort of experiences in life that opens you up to surveillance, right? So surveillance, like, yes, we all are living through this total surveillance system because we're all carrying phones, right? But to say that something is universal does not mean that it's neutral, right? So, within this surveillance system, women are surveilled more than men. So then I realized, oh, wait a minute, I'm going in the wrong direction. My character really ought to be a woman. And then further than that, like being mothers, you're constantly watched and judged for all of the choices that you make. And so it made sense to have a mother be the center of this book, because I really wanted readers to think about surveillance beyond the technological aspect of it, but to think about its roles in many different parts of our lives, and to think about how, you know, different people are surveilled differently. It's not just flat.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, motherhood is a very central theme in my book. And I want to shout out to my daughter who's here with us today. And to whom the book is dedicated. But I think something I think so much about as a mother is just, I want to prepare my children for the future in a good way, and that feels so hard right now. Maybe it always feels hard, but I feel like it feels so hard right now to envision the future that lies ahead of us between the artificial intelligence and other forces at play, climate change. And so definitely, I feel like different writers have different sources of inspiration. For me, my anxiety is my greatest source of inspiration. And so some of the anxieties at play are in this book are climate change, surveillance, artificial intelligence, and really writ large, how to raise children for the future that we are entering. And so that was a very motivating factor for me. Also, there is a huge element of surveillance in the book, and May, in her attempts to give her family a moment of respite, actually make some missteps that cause the surveillance to get her in a really bad situation that causes her, I'm going to not do spoilers, but something bad comes of her being surveilled, and something bad also comes of her being a mother. Her husband gets very different treatment than she does, and I think that has something to do with the idea that mothers are held to an extremely high standard. So the book is definitely exploring that too.
Yeah, and you both have just brought up the climate change. There's a term, the eco-dystopia. What do you think about that term? Is it or is it just like if it's any dystopia right now? I don't even know how you feel about the word dystopia, but is any dystopia right now inevitably an eco-dystopia? I mean, I don't know if that's. Have they always been? I don't know. I just felt like that was another sort of point of conversation, that they were both there.
I think it's pretty much impossible, given everything that we know about the present right now, to think about possible futures and not think about what is happening in climate within that world building. So, this is the first novel I've written that's set in the future, and one of the things I realized pretty quickly in writing it is that it has in common with a historical novel, another genre in which I wrote, in that they both involve the creation of worlds that none of us alive have ever seen. And I think that knowing what we know now, you're always writing from the present, even if you're writing about the past or you're writing about the future. So writing from the present about the future, how could we not think about climate? So in Helen's novel, this idea that this botanical garden is the only space that these kids can experience nature is a foundational aspect of the book. And I think in my novel, there's a moment, this is California in the future, so I let you imagine what happens at one point to the characters, and it is climate motivated,
Yeah.
I did a lot of research for this book because though it is not our world, it is, one critic wrote, it's 5 minutes in the future, but it really, the world building I do is entirely seeded from the moment that we're in. So I read books like The Uninhabitable Earth by David Wallace Wells, which I recommend that you read after steeling yourself. And I read a lot about climate change. So I definitely, it was very interesting to me to interact with minds that are thinking about what is coming in terms of the climate future, and to really, it's not like it lessened my anxiety, but it just made my anxiety feel a little more nuanced to really read up on it.
Yeah. Not to make everyone anxious, but another point of anxiety in both books, and one of the reasons that these moms make these tough decisions, which we sort of alluded to, is the financial picture that are both in. Laila's book has 50-year mortgages. Seltzer is a treat, I noticed, which was, that really kicked me in the gut. In your book, there's the gig economy is very much May's husband's, Jem's world is a gig worker. And then also when Sato's in the retention centers, her husband has to take on a roommate. I mean, they are both, and part of the precariousness that both of these characters find themselves in their families, was also another tough thing to read. Tell me about that.
Thanks, I guess.
No, it just was so relatable.
Well, I think that for me, one aspect of the future that I am concerned about in the book is just what the value of human labor will be. And she has lost the job to AI. Her job was to help actually refine algorithms to be more conversational in nature, and then they stopped needing even someone to do that because the algorithm can teach itself. And so in the world that she's in, people are just losing their jobs to AI, and her husband works for an app where he does all sorts of random things like picking up people's dead mice and buying them exotic fruits at the grocery store, just random things. And so, I hope this doesn't happen, but I'm really concerned about people being displaced in their jobs by AI. And connected to that, obviously there are very material consequences to that, but also psychological and existential consequences of, what is the value of being a living human? And to have that devalued en masse is very concerning to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think in my case, I understand that people do have a lot of anxiety about surveillance. I have a lot of anxiety about surveillance, but that is not why I wrote the book. I think I wrote the book because I really wanted to explore an idea. I wanted to think, what if this data collection that we have right now moves forward and gets to a level where it is entering the world of the subconscious, right? So that's sort of the premise of the book. What if these big tech companies find a way to collect internal data? And that really raises questions about our physical integrity, like our rights of ownership over our bodies and our minds, and our independence as human beings. And one way that I think that speculative fiction, which is what I prefer to call it, offers us is the chance to really sort of create these characters and put them in these tough situations and see, well, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? Like, what are we going to do if we have this world? Okay, now I've imagined the worst, now what? And I think that it's a chance to have language for this future that we're afraid of, but the point of it is not to make you think, oh my God, it's so anxiety-inducing. Now I don't want to, nobody that's read my book has thrown their phones into the ocean. And I wish that they would, but that's not what's happened. Because we live in this very difficult world we're constantly making, trade-offs and difficult choices. But it really is about this idea of, physical integrity, and I wanted readers to really think about that through what the characters are doing, and to understand, what are some methods that we might use to survive this world. Like, this is really about survival in the future. And does that survival look like an individualistic effort? I'm going to throw my phone into the ocean and somehow this is going to solve this problem of surveillance. Or is it actually more complicated than that? Is it going to involve different systems in order for us to survive it? I think that's really my goal here, not so much to raise people's heart rates, although it's probably inevitable in the reading of the book.
Tell me more about world building. I sort of had fun at the beginning with these some words, and there's more words and more, other layers. But as you were writing your speculative fiction, what do you say? Okay, here's my world. Oh, that's a little too far outside. That won't work. And how was it similar or different? You talked about writing from the present, but how is it similar or different than other books you've done, or ways that you think about writing a novel when it's this sort of other world?
Well, I mean, the world building, again, to me, is so connected to the research, which I read a lot about artificial intelligence. And so, in a way, yes, it's world building for sure, but it also just feels completely inspired. Inspired feels like a very positive word for it, but like it is taken from predictions that smart people in these fields are making. So that was a great source of inspiration for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a fair thing to say. I remember years ago teaching The Handmaid's Tale to my students, and one of the points I made was that everything that Margaret Atwood put in that book at the time of its publication had already existed in human society prior. All she did was sort of combine it and kind of distill it into the Republic of Gilead. And so in working on this book, I thought about, you know, the sort of unholy marriage that we're already sort of seeing between big tech and the government, right? And looking in particular at the criminal justice system and seeing the kinds of how judges decide, how the cops decide, you know, how do they decide how to police and how to prosecute and how to judge defendants. And so it's taking all of this but pushing it to the next level by bringing this idea that it is happening to dreams. But everything that's in the book is indeed inspired by trends that are already in existence in society right now.
I'm so glad you brought up Atwood, because from the I don't know when I first learned that about Handmaid's Tale, but that struck me so much, that book, which feels, you're like, wow, so creative, how could she ever come up with this? And it is amazing, but it has this basis. And even something like coming up with the name Bunny, I was reading a book by Sherry Turkle, Reclaiming Conversation, The Power of Talk in a Digital Age, and there's a passage there about the term cookies. You know, do you accept the cookies? What an interesting, brilliant word that someone came up with. Like, not surveillance devices or sauerkraut, but, you know, cookies, the thing that you're primed to say yes to. And so I thought, okay, my tech in this book, I'm glad you asked about all these terms, but I'm going to give them non-sinister names. They're going to sound cute and cozy and cuddly. And what's more
safe.
Yeah, and safe. And like, what's more sinister than something sinister that has a cuddly name? So.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think that part of the world building is actually thinking through the language of that world. Like, it is not detention, it's retention. It is not, you know, it's risk assessment. That's, you know, to try to use inoffensive terms, because that is what actually happens in real life. I remember when I was researching this book, I went to Berlin, and I remember we took a tour of sort of the tunnels and this place where they had erected the Berlin Wall. And I remember our guide told us, do you know what the Berlin Wall was called on the east side? And of course, it was called the Wall of Protection. It wasn't, right? It wasn't, and on this side, it was called the Iron Wall. So language is very much a site of, you know, where people are waging these ideological battles, and it is central to the creation of a believable future world, that language, that the language be used in ways that seem inoffensive, so that your characters are going to think, well, it's my dream saver. It's helping me sleep. That's all it does. And then, of course, you know, all kinds of terrible things happen.
Something else that you both have and have alluded to a little bit is the public-private, the capitalism gone wrong, gone astray, gone too far. You know, the need for money may, you know, Sarah, like, but then also the government pairing up with private companies, and how you think, you know, there's like a safety, like the slippery slope of that. Does that tell me about walking into that world? Because that was also very like, oh yeah, we're just sort of going along, and then I
mean, I think so. So for me, when I was working on this book, part of what attracted me to this sort of insane premise of dream surveillance is that really sleep.
Which doesn't feel insane. Like it feels
Yeah.
like,
I mean,
like an obvious,
yeah,
oh,
next
if
step.
A, then
Yeah.
B, then
Yeah.
C, then Dream Hotel.
Yeah, but I think, let's hope not.
Maybe Z.
I think
Maybe
what attracted me to this idea is because when you think about what you're doing every day when you wake up and sort of like when you're going about your day and how often you interact with your phone. If you go into your settings on your phone, you can go through and you can look up pickups. It will tell you how often you pick up your phone in a day. And that number is going to be very sobering. So
I mean, you picked it up like 4 times since we've been sitting here.
it's going to be like, I remember a journalist saying that his pickups are like 240. I was like, this is insane. This is really bad. But I think what's really interesting to me about the world of dreams is that it is really the last place where we have absolute freedom. And sleep is the only place where we have release from the pressures of capitalism. From the moment that we wake up, we are like, people wake up and immediately reach for their phones and reach for social media and start. And if you think about it in terms of labor, what you're doing is you're waking up and logging in and making more money for, I don't know, pick your poison, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, one of them, right, in social media. So sleep is the only time when you're not doing that. You're not checking your phone. You're not trying to help any of these people make an extra billion. You're not shopping on Amazon. You're not doing all of those things. And so I fear that may be the next frontier, right? Is like sort of like our neural data, and so I guess that's one of the ideas that the book explores is that what privacies we have left. We only know that we are who we are because of the fact that we have these interior lives. If you know everything about somebody else's interior life, you still maintain your independence, but you're not, like, you can't go inside someone's head, right? So we all have a certain shreds of privacy, but that is kind of what we're in the process of losing, I fear. So.
You don't quite say this, but this is very womb-like. I mean, I feel like, and there's at the very beginning of the book, she comes home from this surgery and it's sort of quiet, and you think as a reader, I'm not really reading anything, but that she's home alone, and then and then everyone's really tucked into their womb, which is very chilling. And the wombs are these, I don't know. I just thought, I mean, you don't exactly quite say it, but I feel like the wombs are sort of a similar sort of private dream oasis, / are being totally observed by big tech.
Yeah, I did really want that surprise that you think it really seems like someone is just alone in her apartment. And then it's a surprise moment. Oh, wait, she's actually home with her whole family, but no one's talking, no one's interacting, they're in their wombs. And her family members eventually kind of emerge in a little bit of a zombie-like state from their wombs, like, oh, hey, how did the surgery go? And so this is, again, I think that we have a real, the wombs definitely take a basis in the way that we can all fall into our phones. And when you were talking, I was thinking, I used to give my students a writing assignment I teach creative writing at Brooklyn College, and I give them the assignment, write about the first 5 minutes of your day. And it was an interesting assignment because people would interact with their cat or remember a dream or something. And then I started to get everyone to just be like, I woke up and looked at my phone. And then I was like, okay, I can't give that a writing assignment anymore.
Wow.
So maybe a challenge to all of us, like, go the first hour of the day without picking up your phone. See how that might change your life. But I am really interested to go back to kind of the original question, I think, although maybe I've lost track of it, sort of the way the private and the public intersect. I think that when you are being surveilled through your devices or even through your Google searches, which kind of follows the way that your thoughts are going or your curiosity is going, or in intimate personal moments like May experiences, even if the surveillance doesn't actually do anything, it changes the quality of that moment. And like the experience of true solitude, or the experience of really being able to interact and just have that interaction be what it is in the moment, so I think something really important is lost. Franklin Foer's book, World Without Mind, he writes very beautifully about this in that book, which I also read. And you know, I think that in May's case, she kind of gets caught in a bad moment that makes her look really bad, but it's in the flow of her doing countless things that are very good. And so it can have the effect that you're getting judged on or caught in your worst moment. And it distorts the whole story of who you are.
Yeah. I mean, I think we know from research already that surveillance modifies behavior, people's behavior. Like, people behave differently when they believe they are under surveillance versus when they believe that they are not under surveillance. I think what's really frightening is that the most sort of pernicious systems of surveillance, for example, the patriarchy, are so internalized by us that we don't even question why we're doing the things that we're doing. You know, are we, you know, I don't know, dressing a certain way because that's how, you know, that's how we like it and we like how it looks, or are we doing it because that's how, you know, our society has trained us to like that particular way of dressing or whatever. And so I think, and that's the real danger, is that we are now habituating ourselves to these systems of surveillance and beginning to internalize it.
And I think that for me, that issue, in my book, it's complicated because she has, the kids have their bunnies, so she is able to know where they are at all times.
And what does that look like when she looks at it? This is very...
Yeah, so when she sees them in the app, they're little beating hearts. So she can see the cute little beating hearts, and it's extremely reassuring and wonderful. And do I track my children through an app? I do. So I feel like the system makes hypocrites of us all. I mean, I too sign the fine print without reading it. Like, I too track my children, surveil my children. And in the book, when she tries to separate her children from that surveillance, really negative consequences follow that send her back to wanting to track them. And so I'll read the epigraph to the book because this really gets at it for me. The epigraph is, "Poison is in everything, and no thing is without poison. The dosage makes it either a poison or a remedy." And this is from Paracelsus, who was an alchemist and physician in the 1400s, not writing about technology, but that is it for me. Poison is in everything, and no thing is without poison. The dosage makes it either a poison or a remedy. You know, what is the right amount? It's great that we can FaceTime with people who live across the world. You know, there are beautiful, incredible blessings of technology, and there are, taken to extreme, there are really frightening consequences. And I feel like Hum is just me sort of teetering, being like, what even is this, and what is the right way to live in these circumstances?
Well, and there's in that, again, in the first couple pages, May realizes that the Hum isn't getting, back to labor, isn't getting tired by the surgery. The Hum is a machine, so the Hum is, you know, full of energy, you know, to be there.
And meanwhile, she's sweating and she's getting thirsty and just...
She's very human.
The human, like the burdens of having a human body. That was very important to me, that right away, her, I don't
pain,
know, the mushiness of being a human is very front and center.
Yeah. You said you feel hopeful, and right. Tell us about that.
Well, because when I was working on the book, there were times when I had to put the manuscript down because I had come up with some new thing that was extremely, you know, frightening, and so there were, you know, which terrified me, and I wrote it. But by the time I, you know, finished working on the manuscript and revised it, and I sat back and looked, I really did feel quite hopeful, because one of the things that the book made me realize is that in every era there are new innovations, and each time these innovations make massive promises that the world is going to be made better with these innovations.
Vacuum cleaner.
Yeah. that did make the world better in some ways, right? Yeah. So that there's all these innovations, and they're going to change the world. And then what ends up happening is we end up reinventing the world in much the same way as it has existed before. So one of the reasons that the book very consciously refers to the 1930s is because when I tell people, oh, this book has pre-crime, it sounds like, oh, so futuristic. But in reality, like, pre-crime has existed exists now and has existed in the past. So for example, in the 1920s and 30s, you know, women were, well, not just women, but this happened a lot to women and to women of color, were put in these sort of reformatories because they were like, oh, they're loose, or, you know, they've, you know, talked back to their parents and they need to be reformed so that they do not become criminals. And these women ended up in these reformatories for far longer than if they had actually committed a crime. So this, you know, this world has been troubled, is troubled, and will be troubled. But one of the things that this book made me realize is how, in a way, it made me want to think of myself as an ancestor. It made me think of myself as like the role that I play in right now. I am leaving the world for my, you know, great-grandchildren or whatever. And so what choices am I making right now? The world that, the choices that I make right now, they're gonna have to live with in the future. And it also made me realize, like, this whole fear that we have of, like, oh my gosh, you know, big tech, they have so much data about us, and they're gonna hold it forever, and it's like, it's an archive. And like every other archive, throughout history, it will be liable to the same sort of, you know, faults. Like, no archive is complete, you know, no archive is beyond damage or gaps or, you know, loss or hacking. So it's not, you know, things are not bleak. Like, it's the choices that we make today in how we, particularly in how we regulate these technologies, that are going to decide the future. We're not just passive, you know, witnesses to this future. We are active participants in it, and it's the choices that we make, the advocacy that we engage in, the actions that we take, particularly as a community, not so much as individuals, that really is going to make a difference for the future. So I did feel quite hopeful at the end.
I'm going to pause you 1 second. We're going to, there are 2 microphones here, and in just a sec, we'll start doing questions from the audience. So start lining up, and you're going to say.
I was going to say, okay, I will say one last thing on because it really ties into what you're saying. So if I started the book with these different anxieties, part of it was to do research about them, learn more about them, write about them, try to understand them better. And part of my research process did involve interviewing some experts. And I interviewed a sociologist who studies climate change. I interviewed a woman who developed a fabric made of algae that is very sustainable. I interviewed someone who studies global supply chains. And I would always begin the interview by asking, what are you worried about? And depending on their specific field, they would have an answer to that. And then I would end the interview by asking, what gives you hope? And to that question, they all had the same answer, which was very moving to me, which was collective action. That was, I mean, it's what you were saying, and I saw that in your book. And at the end of Hum, there is May, who has been struggling for connection to her family and to her environment and to herself, is able to find a kind of connectivity and collectivity that hopefully brings at least a note of hope at the end. Not every reader sees it, but I do intend it to be there.
And about it yourself, do you feel hopeful?
The book helped me.
The book helped,
Yeah,
okay,
the book
okay.
helped me.
Okay, great. Oh,
So many questions.
Yeah, okay, let's start here.
Thank you both for being here. This was wonderful. When I read Dystopia, I often think about the meme where scientists finally create the torment nexus from classic sci-fi novel. Do not create the torment nexus. Do you ever get nervous when you're coming up with these ideas of, like, what if somebody reads this and they actually make it?
That is such a good question. I know. I'm like, are they going to start putting wombs on the market so we can all be fully engaged?
If they do, you should be getting parts of that patent, because let me tell you, that is a phenomenal product.
Yeah.
I know.
I mean, I wish that these tech guys wouldn't be reading like sci-fi as a how-to manual and really like read it more as like as how it was intended, which is as a warning and a thought experiment. Like, no, don't do that, rather than let's full speed ahead.
Cautionary tale, not roadmap.
Yes.
Yeah. I have had a couple of readers, and this has been very moving to me, who develop AI, who said reading your book made me think differently and more deeply about what I do and will change.
That's
nice. That is amazing. So, but yes, let's hope they don't put wombs on the market.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Lena. I have a question for Laila. I want to preface, I haven't finished your book. I'm like 30 pages in.
Okay.
So
There's no quiz and no spoilers.
my question is, what attracted me to it specifically as an Arab American is the fact that the main character is Arab, and she has an interest in like colonial history, and obviously that plus a surveillance state is very like conscious choice. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, because the line that you wrote about airport security and how facial recognition kind of eased that for a second, that was literally me like this week when I was in an airport, and I was like, this is terrifying. So yeah, I wanted you to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no, that definitely was a conscious choice. So the character Sarah Hussein trained as a historian. She specializes in migration, in post-colonial history, border formation, and I just wanted to sort of prime the reader, it's just through a small detail to get them to think about forms of control, both particularly political forms of control, and the role that surveillance plays in them. So within colonial systems, it's not possible to have control without surveillance. So the colonial power would come in and start making censuses and having like counting everybody and assigning them roles. And I really wanted people to think about what big tech is doing with our data, because essentially what big tech is doing is laying claim to our private data and saying that data is theirs and they get to extract it, sell it, commodify it, transform it, and do whatever they want with it. So it is really a form of colonialism. And part of what you're seeing right now is kind of like what happened in the early part of the 20th century when European powers were all like racing each other and even fighting conflicts and wars in order to see who was going to get what colony in Africa. That's what those guys are now doing with AI. They're all kind of on a race with each other to try to see who's going to win the AI race. It really is a form of colonialism. It's saying, this data that you created, that your body created, is actually, we're going to use it and we're going to make money off of it. And so we really need to be thinking in terms of resistance to that movement, what it took to get rid of colonialism, it will take to get rid of big tech's hold on our data.
Thank you so much.
So as I was reading your first book, Ms. Phillips, The Beautiful Bureaucrat, which I highly recommend, I sort of stopped in the middle of it to write down this question of like, are you only ever as secure as your most careless choice? Which I felt like was sort of the theme of the book, and was a lot of like the driver of like, it was sort of, to me, it felt like the engine of dread in that book was coming from that, and sort of like the specter of unemployment. I would love to know, like in your books, if you made a conscious choice about like what's going to be driving the dread forward, and like how, because in some of the great dystopian novels of the past century, like inevitability and futility have been major themes, but a lot of the dystopia of this century is about your choices. And I would love to know if that was a conscious
choice.
God, that's so interesting. I mean, these situations I put my characters in are just so difficult for them, and it comes so organically to put them in these periods of distress. I definitely did think in Hum, and thank you for reading The Beautiful Bureaucrat, and that was my good old Josephine who was struggling in that one. But May constantly feels like she's making bad choices, like she's trying to make a good choice, and it always backfires. And so maybe there is something, I think that some of the suffering that my characters experience is a guilt that like the hardship they're going through, they have brought up on themselves. And I don't really know how that fits into the dystopian theme, but that's certainly some of my own dystopian tendencies in my own mind, that that you are somehow responsible for the bad things that are happening to you because you didn't read the fine print when you agreed to the deal.
Yeah.
You know, that you have done something wrong.
Terms of service.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually for both of you. What kind of books or authors do you love that you think your fans would be surprised to hear you indulge in or enjoy?
That's a good question. Your shirt's amazing. We all should be wearing that.
Says unreliable narrator.
Unreliable narrator. What would surprise me?
Okay, it's funny because every time I get asked questions about, what books, influence, I draw a complete blank.
What's a book?
That it would
You talked about Margaret
surprise me
Atwood.
that I read. I don't know if it would surprise you because it's totally relevant. It's a work of philosophy. It's Discipline and Punish by Michel Foucault. I don't know if that's really surprising. I mean, but all of his works were really very influential in how I thought about surveillance in this book.
God, I feel like I would say Kafka and you'd be like, duh. Calvino and duh. I mean, what's surprising? I think that one element of my reading life is that because I have kids, I read children's literature or I revisit the Phantom Toll Booth. Also not surprising that would be an influence. But I read a lot of books, like National Geographic books or Atlas Obscura about animals every night with my son. And so I think that that's sort of a surprising element of my reading that's actually really formative for
I was going to say, it's
that I wouldn't be reading otherwise.
Yeah,
So.
that makes sense.
I'm sorry to say we have time for 2 more questions. We actually don't really have time for 2 more questions, but we'll do 2 more questions. We'll
One
start with
thing
you.
I found really impactful in Hum as speculative fiction was the fact that all of these references and news stories were real news stories that you found. Were there any that you thought were particularly important in shaping it or that stood out to you that maybe people would enjoy hearing?
Oh, thank you for asking that. So yeah, so the final 12 pages of the book are all of my notes and the bibliography of all the reading I did while I was working on it and all of those things that inspired me to world build, but with the seed from our own world. And it makes me really happy when I meet a reader who says, because there are books you can further reading in this. So one striking article, the first one mentioned in the book, is a New York Times article that the number of birds in the northern part of the continent has declined by 3 billion or 29% over the past 50 years. So that's an example of the kind of facts that appear in the book. So I couldn't pick among them because all of the ones, the book used to be twice as long as it is, and I ended up cutting tons of those references. So the ones that are in each one of them has a really special place, and so if you want further reading, it's there in the endnotes. But thank you for asking that question.
Last question.
Hi, this is a question for Laila. I just started the Moores account, and I didn't even know that you had branched into speculative fiction, so I'm really excited to read this book. But yeah, so I'm getting the references, I'm feeling the references to Kafka and to Orwell, with thought crime and incriminating yourself through dreams. Mm-hmm. But I heard you mention dreams in the context of a shadow. And I'm wondering was there anything to do with Carl Jung or Jungian psychology?
No, not particularly. In the book, I did a lot of reading about dreams and why we dream and sort of the electrical activity in the brain that goes into dreaming. I read dream collections. One of the books that I have been pressing on a lot of people is called The Third Reich of Dreams, which is a collection of dreams that this woman, Charlotte Berat, who was a German, I think she was a journalist, started collecting dreams during the rise of Hitler in Germany. Dreams that she heard from people in her life and smuggled those dreams out and then collected them later into a book. Okay. And it just basically gives you insight into how much, when totalitarian systems take over people's lives, that sort of a process is reflected in the dreams that they had. It's a fascinating book. So that kind of, I was really more interested in how ordinary people are dealing with the role of dreams in their lives, not so much in, analysis.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks to everyone for sticking around. Thanks, you guys. Yeah, so good.
Thank you for this. This was fun.